we had an understanding that Horrigan may have had some meetings and some things that he was doing that you felt that was not where you thought he should have been. And I put it on the loyalty thing where I said that maybe he wasn't loyal enough and that kind of thing. What was it in that relationship that you felt that you really felt that, you know what, this is not a really good fit for me as the leader of this town? Because, as you say, he just seemed to not want to put the political hat away to do the work.
And I think that's the most important piece. It's not even necessarily about loyalty to me or anything like that. I think that it is important that if you work for a mayor, then the mayor's priorities are your priorities to implement, because the mayor was elected by the people to implement that vision, right? In that role, though, that non-political role.
That's correct.
If you are focused on the political, and you are focused on the political in a way that undermines your relationship with your employer, with your boss, with the mayor, with the person who is elected by the people to present and implement this vision, that's problematic all on its own, because it takes you away from your actual job, which is operations. You should be meeting with directors. You should be meeting with people who are driving the plow. You don't need to meet with council members for that. And one really good example, you certainly don't need to be meeting with council members and cutting your boss out of the conversation, because that, frankly, I think, interrupts the will of the people who elected that person to drive the vision.
Okay.
So I think that's an important thing. It's not about loyalty to a person, but one really weird example of how the operations piece was interfered with by his insistence on these political conversations. There's a council member, Jim Petrus, who announced that he was running for mayor a while back. Obviously couldn't pull petitions until petitions were available to pull, but he had been telling people he was running for mayor. Dan Horrigan knew that he was running for mayor. Dan Horrigan wanted to have a meeting with Jim Petrus. Now, this meeting was supposed to be about roads, road funding. And I told Dan Horrigan I wanted to sit in on that meeting. Now, Dan Horrigan had been in his position for a month or so. And as somebody in your position for a month, you don't know what you're talking about. And maybe you're just going to a meeting to learn about something or something, and that's fine. But I said, you know what, I want to sit in on that meeting. And he said, okay. And so this was scheduled to be a Zoom meeting. We were going to do this in his office with Jim Petrus. We were going to talk about roads on a Zoom. Now, I know more about our road program and our budget than Dan Horrigan does after a month on the job, which makes sense, which is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I wanted to sit in on this meeting. So we get to the day of the meeting. This is February 28th. And just to get back to this, Natalie's at the office. She's there with me. She's in my office primarily, just doing some other stuff. But she knows that I have a meeting scheduled, that I'm going to be going into Dan Horrigan's office and having this meeting, because I talked to her about we were going to do this in his office with Jim Petrus. We were going to talk about roads on a Zoom. Now, I know more about our road program and our budget than Dan Horrigan does after a month on the job, which makes sense, which is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I wanted to sit in on this meeting. So we get to the day of the meeting. This is February 28th. And just to get back to this, Natalie's at the office. She's there with me. She's in my office primarily, just doing some other stuff. But she knows that I have a meeting scheduled, that I'm going to be going into Dan Horrigan's office and having this meeting, because I talked to her about my day. And she notices that the place where I'm supposed to be having a meeting coming up soon, we just had somebody come in and they're starting to paint that office. And so she says, hey, I thought you were having a meeting. She was telling me, hey, they're painting this office. What's up with that? And so I go find Dan Horrigan, and Dan Horrigan has left, and he's trying to find some other place to have a meeting with Jim Petrus, because he called somebody to paint his office during the time that we were supposed to have a meeting in his office and did not tell me about it. So I went to him and I said, hey, what's going on? I thought we were going to be meeting in your office with Jim Petrus. I told you I wanted to sit in on that meeting. And he said, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. So I'm standing outside the executive conference room on the upper level in City Hall, talking to my city administrator, my second in command, the person who is hired to work for me to assist in the operations of the city. And he tells the mayor that he's not comfortable with the mayor sitting in on a meeting with a council member who has already declared that he's running for mayor.
Hold on. Is this the second time or this the first time?
This is the first time.
I remember the first time. This is the second time.
The second time he tells me that he's not comfortable with me sitting in on this meeting, on a meeting ostensibly about roads. Now, I'll say I didn't know how to take that. Honestly, it was flabbergasting. I didn't know how to take that. It was confusing. That response was confusing. But I'll tell you, where the operations piece meets the political piece, he really wanted to have that meeting with Jim Petrus, and he really didn't want me to sit in on it.
That's wild.
So he canceled the meeting. Except, I hear later from Jim Petrus that he got information from Dan Horrigan about roads. That they talked about roads at some point. And Dan Horrigan told Jim Petrus that a city our size should be spending $6 million on our road program. Now, Dan Horrigan is from Akron. He was mayor of Akron for 2 terms. And he was on the job for a couple months before he left. Dan Horrigan did not have enough information to assert a particular number of dollars that we should be spending annually on our road program, especially without consulting with the public works director and the mayor about how those things could be administered, and especially not when, for the first time in modern history, maybe all of our history as a city, we don't have a full year budget at the beginning of the year.